Hello, I'm Brian P., and welcome to Scaling the Well. On today's show, I thought we'd talk about something that people talk about every day. And I hear a lot of people say they hate it, which is the concept of dating and relationships in the modern era. Um, I've almost been married 3 years, to be 3 years this coming November. And so I've been out of the dating pool for a while, but I've had a lot of experience. So much so my wife teases me about it. Um, I've basically, been in the dating pool. Well, I was in the dating pool years ago, throughout my entire 30s. And you say, wow, throughout your entire 30s. Yeah. Because I didn't get married until I was 44, and that was my first marriage, no kids or whatever. And there's reasons for that. And I'll discuss that on the show. And we're also going to talk about a little bit about the power dynamics between men and women when it comes to dating. We're going to talk about the concept that I call the flip. And we're going to talk a little bit about online dating and why maybe that's, limiting in some ways, even though the technology would suggest that it's more freeing. And just how people should probably feel about dating in general. And I guess we shouldn't tell people how to feel, but it's something. It at least is my opinion, and it comes from my insights and things that I've experienced in my life. So first of all, yeah, I didn't get married until I was 44, and in retrospect, I think that's great. Now, obviously, I've only haven't been married for 3 years. I've known my wife for about 5 years. Um, and when when we were engaged, she kind of was like, wow, like, not that I'm too good to be true. I don't want to, again, I'm going to repeat this throughout the podcast. I never thought I was all that. I'm not like the greatest looking guy. I mean, at least not in my opinion. I mean, I think I'm average. I am a little bit above average in height, but that's about it. But what she was kind of saying from a superficial checklist, I was 40. Well, this was before I got married, so let's say I was 43, 42. I was in my 40s. I had never been married before, and so there was no like ex-wives to deal with. Don't have any children, so she didn't have to become a mother. Even though she was the type of person who would be willing to be a stepmother, she always kind of thought she would be because she was into a serious relationship later in life as well, later than a lot of women, I should say. And yeah, I didn't, and I had some pretty good things going. I had a good job. I had a master's degree. I have my own place, So she's just like, wow, why, you must be hiding something. Like, why, are you sure, you don't have any of these, these negative things, not negative things, but things that most men in their 40s have, and, and yeah, basically what happened is that, for a lot of my working life, especially in my 30s, I was a social worker. And why is that important? Well, as a social worker, it's 80 to 90% women. And so I was constantly dating. Now, that doesn't say why I waited, but I was able to date a lot. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But back to the point of, I wasn't somebody who was in a rush to get married. I didn't have a need for it. My mother had been divorced twice. So I didn't look at marriage as a bad thing, but I didn't see the priority of it. At least as far as it leads to happiness. I was just kind of like, yeah, I'm sure that there's some people that are happily married. I see a lot of people that have been divorced, and I see a lot of people who are married that are not happy at all. That includes friends and family. So it wasn't something I was going to rush into just because, somebody externally says, oh man, you better hurry up and do this. And then because I dated so much in my 30s, I think that I reversed, the midlife crisis. If you guys ever watched pro wrestling as a kid, when someone gets somebody in the figure four, it was that horrible leg lock, right? And it hurt really bad. But then once in a while, you get this really cool wrestler who could reverse the figure four. And basically, all you had to do was turn over on his stomach. But he would reverse the figure four. Well, I reversed the midlife crisis, in my opinion. And I'm not the first guy to do it, but I did it because since I dated, up into my 40s, basically, my midlife crisis, and I don't consider it a crisis, but let's call it that, was settling down. Whereas other people who get married in their 20s, and possibly their early 30s, um, their midlife crisis is, wow, I missed out on stuff. Wow, I want to experience that. I never got to. And oh man, that one person who was so hot and blah blah blah, but they were always dating this person. Well, now they're available, and that's the person I really wanted from jump. And yeah, these are very selfish, superficial things. But if you look at our divorce rate, these things have consequences, and these things have an effect on the psyche, and it can happen to a man or a woman. So that never happened to me. I'm married now, and I'm not ever. I don't honestly do not have one thought of like, wow, I wish I would have done that before I was married, or oh man, I wonder if I would have asked this girl out, and could I have been up with her? What would our life be like? None of those thoughts ever enter my head because they just don't exist. I dated enough to where I knew that the end goal were I didn't want with those particular women. And when I was ready to get married, I did my due diligence like you should do when you enter into any partnership, and I'm happy. And I still to this day think I made the right choice. So that was my explanation. My midlife crisis was settling down, and back to why I have so many insights into dating. Okay, yeah, I did date a lot. I admit it. I'm not saying it's something you should be proud of. I know a lot of men are proud of their dating histories. It's not. It's just something that happened because if you don't get married and you're single throughout your 30s, then you're going to date. Even if you only date 3 girls a year, well, that's 30 girls in 10 years. You know what I mean? So it's just the amount of time that passes that means the numbers increase. I was never a player. I never lied to anybody. I never dated more than one person at the same time. And that's what I suggest for everybody. For one, it's just you don't want to be deceptive. It's a lot to deal with. Keeping up with lies and stuff like that. Why would you want that? And eventually you're going to meet somebody who's just about that life, and that retaliation of you treating them the way they don't want to be treated could be severe. And I've seen it. Again, I worked in child welfare services. I've seen many a domestic violence case simply because somebody was seeing somebody on the side and that their partner didn't know about. So that never happened with me. As a matter of fact, I'm still friends with pretty much all of the girls I've dated. I mean, there's some people I've lost contact with, but even at the point of losing contact with them, I was friendly, on good terms with them. A lot of them are my friends on Facebook. Some of them my wife has even met, and it's never been any drama, Well, there was one time there was one girl who was kind of like, she was upset because we'd broken up a while ago, but, she got over it. Because again, I never lied to her. And I think that's the key. So, and if you're using honesty, and that's not just with the relationships, that's with anything, business interactions, interactions with your family, the more honest you are, the more empowering it is to you because it's freeing. When somebody knows the truth, they can't accuse you of anything. They can only accuse you of being you. and that's okay. Be you. So that's, kind of how I built up my dating resume. And on top of being a social worker, with 80% to 90% women, again, and I sort of told y'all to repeat this, it's not because I was all that. It's because sometimes, I'll give you an example. I'll work in an office and there'd be, let's say, 10 guys, but there'd be 100, there'd be 90 women, right? 10 guys. And out of those 10 guys, 5 of them are married already. So they were already locked up, right? And then 2 of the guys were gay, and then there was 3 guys. So even if we were all equal, that's 3 guys to 90 women. That's not a bad ratio, If you went to a club and you had those ratios all the time, men would be very happy. Women would be, well, the ratio wouldn't last very long. Women would stop going to those clubs probably. So, and then I had a lot of friends who were just platonic friends with no romantic attachments to them, and between me and them. And I would go out to happy hours because those happy hours would reflect the same ratios that were at work, and go out to family parties and whatever. And they would have friends. Women have friends who, women at work have friends who don't work with you. And so that even increased my dating pool even farther. And I didn't date a lot at work, I should say. It sounds like it, but it really wasn't, I wasn't the office, rake or whatever you call them. Wow, rake, that's an old word. I think that's from the 40s. But yeah. And then I had this other job, which was in mixed martial arts, and it was a lot of fun. My friends and I ran a mixed martial arts organization. I think we ended up having like something close to 40 events, starting like in 2003 through 2006 or something, and that was cool. And I wasn't famous, that's another thing. I wasn't famous, but anything that is in the entertainment industry spectrum where you're putting on an event or whatever, I was a commentator for fights. And so I would interview fighters, and you would see that, on DVDs and sometimes even on television. You'd hear me on the radio sometimes. And I was a journalist, so you'd see my name in print, and I'd write articles for different magazines and different online websites. And if you actually came to the fights live, you would actually see me doing commentary, kind of like the Joe Rogan at the UFC, and on a much smaller level, obviously. But that was my job. I would commentate on fights with a partner, and that was cool. And it was, one of our friends was one of the co-founders of Affliction. So back then, in the early to mid 2000s, we were wearing the latest gear. Now if you saw that in 2018, some of the stuff that we wore, you might cringe. We probably would cringe. A lot of skulls and crosses and stuff. but at the time, that was the in style, and we had all the stuff. We had stuff you couldn't even get on the website. So it was a fun time. I had a blast. We traveled to different states, and we had after parties after every show, and we had sponsors there, and sponsors would give me stuff, and it was cool. And I was doing all that while being a social worker, and so that was very attractive to a lot of people. A lot of women found that cool. And so again, that was just another part of my resume. Not bragging, maybe a little bit. Not bragging, but that is why. You ask, well, how, it's kind of like, this is my voir dire, right? When you testify in court, the opposition will say, well, how are you an expert witness? And then you have to tell them your experience. Well, if I'm going to tell people about dating, they have to know that I've dated, because obviously, the more you do something, the better you get, right? Practice, doesn't make perfect in dating, but it gives you a lot of things to talk about, and you develop a lot of insights. So there's that. So let's get into a little bit about the power dynamics between men and women when it comes to dating. And one of those power dynamics that's obvious and people talk about a lot is the fact that women have all the power. At least that's what a lot of men think, because women do a lot of the choosing, And I remember being in high school, and there was like some really attractive girls at my high school, and they were able to date men who are already in the military, those who are in college sometimes, and sometimes guys who are just grown men who, had their own construction businesses and things like that. And I'd be like, man, how am I going to be 16, 17 years old competing with grown men with jobs? That's not fair. They should date women their own age and stuff. But women had the ability to do that. Once in a while, a guy would have the ability to do that. It's less frequent, but it does happen. There's some guys out there who are hot and they get treated with special treatment as well, But yeah, women do have this power, and I think a lot of people don't talk about it a lot, but it's true. And a lot of men resent that. They resent it a lot. Not every man, but a lot of men, especially men who don't consider themselves successful dating. And, I didn't know how much this resentment spread into other areas, until I actually started watching YouTube and listening to other podcasts. There's a movement called, they use the acronym, but it's basically called Men Going Their Own Way. And it's about how women just have this, this power over America, and and they're just turning America into leftists, and they have power in when it comes to custody, and they have power when it comes to this, and they just they could just leave a man, and a man has no options, and basically like men are victims of the power of women, and don't get me wrong, I've been involved, especially, in court systems. I've seen custody cases. I've been, in dependency cases. I've seen it. I've seen, things happen to where you could say, yeah, a woman, a particular woman has taken advantage and has gotten something because they were female, or somebody felt sorry for her and not the man. And so she got a leg up on him. But listen, I'm an African-American man. I'm a black dude. Right. And I will say this, and a lot of people could get angry about this statement. I don't care. In this country, at least today, I would rather be a black man in America of any socioeconomic class status than the wealthiest white woman. Let me say that again, because a lot of people, be like, what do you say? I would rather be a black man in America than the wealthiest white woman. And why is that? Well, because, again, it's my experience and the things I've seen, and statistics, you could be the wealthiest white woman in this country, or let's just put them in a group, affluent Caucasian females. And yeah, you're still more likely to be abused domestically by your partner. You're still more likely to be raped. Again, I'm saying more likely. I'm not saying that none of these things can happen to men. I'm just saying far more likely. And those type of things, you're more likely to be molested as a child. It can still happen to a man, and it does. I know men who have been molested as children, and it's devastating. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. Sometimes that could even be more devastating to men under certain circumstances. But again, you're more likely to have these things as a woman, and you don't have the physical power of a man. So on any circumstances, I live in San Diego. If I wanted to go walking through Balboa Park at night, not that scared. If I'm by myself, walking alone, I'm not that scared. If I want to go to a club downtown or whatever, at least, when I went to clubs, and I didn't want to pay the valet, yeah, I'll park 2 blocks away in a more shady area and walk by myself to the club. And then after the club, we'll walk back to my car, didn't bug me that much. I'm not saying that's even smart for a man, but I'm just saying that because I'm a man, I didn't have the fear. I didn't have the anxiety that comes with that. I didn't have to worry about, calling a friend, to help me out of situations, or if some, person was, hitting on me in an overly aggressive manner, trying to be polite, but trying to escape at the same time. I don't have to deal with any of that. And those things affect your psyche. Those things and the abuse can affect the way you think about everything for the rest of your life. And if it happened to the child, it affects your development. And all these things are more likely to happen to women. And as a black man, yes, there was racism, there was disproportionality, there were a lot of, really messed up things. But if somebody, of another race, let's say a white guy has something more than me, and let's say it was unfair that he has more than me, a bigger corner than I do, then okay, but I'm still the king of my little corner. And if a woman is with me in my little corner, from a societal perspective, and again, this is not my, view, but from a societal perspective, then she's even beneath me. So even if you have a black man who's being kept down, a black woman is one step beneath that on the societal scale. I mean, the way she's treated. And again, that's not the way I feel. It's not my opinion. I'm just speaking historically. And, I've seen it, even in this era, but even if I've talked to people, go back to an era, there'd be black men, who were frustrated with society, and they didn't have power over the majority of society, and who did they take it out on? The women they were with. You know what I mean? So it's horrible sometimes. So yeah, that's a soapbox thing, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that statement. And yeah, some people could say, who hey, you wouldn't make that statement if you grew up in the 50s, 60s, or even earlier, and yeah, you may be right. That's not my experience, so I comment on things that I've experienced. So there we are. But yeah, back to the men who resent the power of women. A lot of it is based on sex and the lack thereof, not being able to attract females or get attention from females. So that's why I think the concept that I've just named the flip is important, because the flip happens, I think, around age 35 right now, I would say. And it's when men become a little bit more desirable and women have to work a little bit harder than they used to. And so, especially when it comes to dating, and why is that? Well, for a lot of reasons. So let's say you're a guy who's skinny, not super athletic, not super attractive in his 20s, well, if you don't get married, you don't find somebody, but you continue to pursue your goals. You are in college, you graduate college. You wanted to be, you're in accounting, you become your license as a CPA, you keep knocking down those goals, and time keeps going on as you're knocking down those goals. And so by the time you're in your, mid 30s, well, you are established, and, you can afford a gym membership. You're maybe still not ripped and buff or whatever, but you're healthy and you have your own place, and, you make a decent living. You drive in a car you want to drive. So you become very attractive. And because you didn't get the girls, in college and in your 20s or whatever, you don't have kids. You're not married. You're single. You're an eligible bachelor. Women can go through the opposite, because let's say it's very easy for a woman to find somebody to hook up with. Women don't complain about people not approaching them, men not approaching them. What they complain about is it's not the right men. Why can't I find this guy? Why can't I find the one? Like, I don't know, like they're in the Matrix. I don't know why they're looking for the one, but again, I have this philosophy that if you put anybody on a desert island, any two people, even man, woman, it doesn't matter. You leave them there for 10 years, they're eventually going to hook up. It happens in prison, and it'll definitely happen if it's a man and a woman. It's just, that's my opinion. It doesn't matter. There's something that's basic needs. The reason we have such a hard time choosing when it comes to dating is because we have a lot of choice, and I want to talk about that soon. So, but yes, women usually complain. It's not so much that men are approaching them. It's not the right one. It's almost like they don't have. They have a lot of purses, but they don't have the right purse for that outfit. My wife has a lot of purses, and she thinks she needs another one, and I don't understand why. Again, that could go back to our hunter-gatherer natures and past. I'm sure somebody has done a dissertation on this concept, but hope she doesn't get mad at me for bringing her up. But yeah, there you go. So. But yes, at the flip, the man now becomes the eligible bachelor. The woman, and like anybody, and this is true for men and women, but since women get approached more than men by the opposite sex, they may have wanted something at 21 that wasn't good for them. He might be the most popular, the coolest guy then, but, now this guy is just kind of a layabout, now that he's 29, not really doing much. She's supporting him, maybe, the bad boy, right? Well, the bad boys are only bad. But being a bad boy is only cool, before you're 25. Being a bad boy at 35, you're pretty much called a loser. If you're the kind of guy that's just like, that leisure shoot guy, trying to throw lines at girls, getting in street fights at 35. I think I did get in a street fight at 35, but it wasn't. It wasn't something that was common. I got in more fights when I was 20. It's never good to get in a street fight. It's stupid. And as a martial artist, I discourage it. And I think the more you get into martial arts, the higher the IRLs in martial arts you don't get in fights. It has nothing to do with dating. Just giving you an example of things that losers do, and everyone does loser things once in a while. But yeah, that guy is no longer attractive, and not nearly as attractive as the guy you may have ignored, the woman may have ignored, who's now knocking down his degree, getting into his job, and at age 35, he may have been in his career for 10 years and is established. So for men who are frustrated, angry, don't go the misogynistic, men going their own way route. Just wait, have some patience and concentrate on your goals, because the more you concentrate on you and what's going on with your friends and the people who are already in your life and building your own support networks, the more attractive you are. All people, and women included, are attracted to people who are driven and attracted to people who have good families and good friends. And if you concentrate on those things, you're going to become more attractive even at an earlier stage, but especially by the time you start accomplishing all your goals, you're just gonna knock it out of the park. So just chill, don't worry about it. Life's not over at 26. And for women, I think it's important to realize that the flip is coming and to realize that they do have power, because it's not always going to be, especially if you're people have always thought of you as attractive. Some of the worst things I've seen is women who have always been given stuff because they were attractive, just because of physical attractiveness. And when that attractiveness changes, I don't like to say it goes away, because I think it just changes. It changes into a different type of attractiveness. There's women in their 40s and 50s who are beautiful. And yes, our culture doesn't always treat them that way. But if you concentrate on other things, early, before you get to be, in your 40s and 50s, then whether you have wrinkles or whether you have this or whether you have that, and whether there's a whole crop of young girls coming up behind you who don't have wrinkles and, who can, have 3% body fat and still eat 3 cheeseburgers, and they don't have any kids and they don't have any stretch marks and whatever. It's not going to bug you. You're going to be like, go, and you can pass on your wisdom to them, because you're going to have your life together, and that's what matters. And the foundation of your life isn't going to be your outward appearance. And that's what I'm consistent with when I speak to kids, young women, my own nieces and my cousins, I would tell them the same thing. I'm very consistent with it. And yeah, usually, they're being told that by women, which is good. I think women need other female mentors. But sometimes if you hear it from a man, it's good, because sometimes men, we do women a disservice, especially dads. And I'm not a dad, but I've seen it to where we want to treat the women in our lives as princesses their whole lives, from birth till whenever. And it doesn't serve them that well, because the world's not going to treat you as a princess forever. And so I'm all about preparing people for whatever they're going to face, in the future, not just what's going to make them like me at the moment, and that goes for someone I'm dating, or that goes for somebody I'm mentoring, or that just goes to somebody in my family who looks up to me, and I think that's just kind of the way we should treat everyone. So that's the flip. And, it happens, and I think that the age changes depending on the generation. But like I said, right now it's around age 35. Now, online dating, that's something that, is fairly new. Historically, it's new. There's probably kids that are like 19 now, like, man, online dating has been around since I was a child, Yeah, you're right. But for somebody my age, it's been around a long time too. But it's still new from a historical perspective. And let me tell you why online dating can sometimes, I'm not going to go off on this, but it's one of those things where you're having so much choice that it can actually inhibit your ability to find a partner. And I'm not saying don't use online dating. And me and my wife met on an online site. In addition to the social work and the MMA, yes, I also did online and dating. And you might have even thought I was some type of addict, but no, I'm just a dude, and and I was bored or I was in between people. I would do other things to date, and so. Costco. A lot of people who shop at Costco, they did a study a long time ago. If you notice at Costco, they only have, let's say you want to buy some ketchup, right? They typically only have like 2 brands. And usually one of them is the Costco brand. So like you want to buy, let's say it's Hunt's, I don't even know what kind of ketchup they sell at Costco right now, but let's say it's Hunt's ketchup. So they'll have Hunt's ketchup and they'll have Kirkland. Because they only have 2, it's easier to choose. And they did a study, and that's why. And this actually is one of the reasons Costco dominates. I mean, who doesn't love Costco? It's because whatever product they have, they only have 2. I mean, sometimes it's 3, but usually 2. It's because they did a study and it informed them that the more choices there are, the less likely the customer was to buy. So let me repeat that again. The more choices that Costco offered, the less likely the customer was to buy. So if let's say you went to go get that ketchup, and of course, like let's say you're gonna have a barbecue that Saturday, right? And it's Saturday morning, and you're going to Costco and you need charcoal. Well, yeah, they could offer you 50 brands of charcoal. You're still gonna choose charcoal for a barbecue because you can't have the barbecue without charcoal. But what about the extra stuff, right? If you need ketchup, you're going to choose ketchup. But if you had, like, let's say some cereal in the house, but not a lot, you're going to eventually need to get it that week anyway, and you walk down a cereal aisle, and let's say you weren't at Costco, you were at like Vons or one of the other big grocery chains or whatever. And there's like 20 brands of cereal. And you're like, I don't know. What is my boyfriend like? What's my husband like? What do my kids like? Or, even if you're living by yourself, what do I feel like? Ooh, what's on sale? Oh, and do I have a coupon for that I left at home? There's a lot of analysis that can go in to just walking down a cereal aisle. And if you see that checker line starting to build up, and you know that you got to be back, in time to set up for that barbecue at your house, chances are you might just bail. You're like, I'm going to deal with this later, and any salesperson will say the worst thing that can happen with a customer is that they leave the if it's a car salesman, they say they leave the lot, that's the worst thing that can happen. So Costco figured that out. If you walk down that cereal aisle and they have 2 or 3 choices, it's a lot easier. So, and I think that's the way with online dating. You go on just let's say the old school, Match.com. Well, you literally have millions of people you could choose from, and even in other countries. And some people do, if they have the resources, do date people in other countries that they found online. And it's hard, And now, then they went to Tinder, so it's even easier to reject people, right? It's like swipe left, swipe right, I believe. I know. I actually got out of dating before Tinder hit, so I didn't deal with the whole Tinder era, so to speak. And now they're even beyond Tinder. They got like other apps out there. But of course, you're going to think the grass is always greener when it's just swipe this way, swipe that way. You know what I mean? It's like a video game. There's nothing to risk. It's like having an infinite amount of quarters. There's no risk in playing a slot machine. Because if you have an infinite amount of quarters, you never lose. So you're just waiting for that jackpot, and you just keep putting it in, and you'll stay there for years. You know what I mean? Even after you might hit a jackpot, you might want to hit the next jackpot because you have an infinite amount of quarters. What's funny is, right, if you have an infinite amount of quarters, you don't need to gamble. So you don't even need to play the slot machine. And so that's kind of my point. It's kind of appreciate what you have, A lot of us don't appreciate people who like us because we always think there's something better. The grass is always greener. Well, with online dating and the dating apps that we have now, it's like, yeah, the grass is always greener because there's an infinite amount of lawns, And I'm just saying, like, you got to make some things pass fail. Yeah, you want a man, and I'm not saying you can't have certain things you want in a spouse. You want a man, you want a woman, you want a woman who has this or has this level of career, this level of education. Okay, I'm not, sometimes some people might think those are superficial, some people might not, whatever. But you could always find somebody who has a higher level of education, or it looks a little bit better, or has, a little bit more money. You know what I mean? There's always somebody who can top the categories that you laid out for yourself, and so you could constantly get caught up in looking for something better, even if you had what you wanted, and you said, "This is what I absolutely want" 6 months ago. Now you're like, if I got that, oh, I can get this. You know what I mean? And now that I have this, oh, I could get that. And that's, I think, and it's human. It's human. We always, especially for those of us who are ambitious and are dedicated to continuous improvement. Sometimes we apply that to our relationships, which is not healthy. Continuous improvement is good to apply to business. It's good to apply to ourselves. Like, I want to be better than I was yesterday, but I don't think you should put that on other people, and especially you should put that on on your relationship, especially if your relationship's going great. The one thing that can make your relationship go from great to bad is to say, "Hell, I could make it better," even though it's going great. So just remember that, and that's for men and women. You should always, even before you get into a relationship and dating, I'm not saying that you should date somebody you're not attracted to. I'm not saying you should date somebody that you don't see yourself being with, in the future. I'm not trying to tell people who to date or how to feel about the people who approach them, but I will say try to exercise a little empathy. And one thing when I was in my dating stage, is that if somebody liked me, and it's somebody, let's say it's somebody I wasn't attracted to, and that could be physically, intellectually, whatever, somebody who I just wasn't feeling, I made darn sure that I was understanding of the fact that I'm very lucky that this person likes me, because you're lucky to have anyone like you. Anybody who wants to spend more time with you, wants to find out more about you, you're lucky, because there's people who are in this world who don't have that, and yeah, I might not end up with this person, but I'm flattered. So if somebody likes you, and I think that's what happens, sometimes, like, if you're, I've seen it because a lot of my friends are women, but it happens with men too. Some guy will approach a woman, and it's like, ugh, that's not the guy I like. I like this friend, or this isn't the guy at work that I like. I like that guy, that one over there, oh, why is this guy like? And it's like, I can understand how that can be annoying. And obviously, if he's crossing the line and, he's bugging you and you told him no, all right, that's one thing. But just because the guy likes you, man, you should be flattered. If and that's for men and women, because again, there are people out there, and sometimes it's for superficial reasons, sometimes it's for cultural reasons. They don't have what we would consider maybe the superficial or maybe non-superficial reasons that, that they don't have the dating pool you have. They don't have the ability to attract what you're attracting. And they'd be happy to take that guy. You know what I mean? And maybe it's your job to point them and hook them up. You know what I mean? So yeah, just be happy that anyone likes you, pretty much, because that means you're cool. That means, yeah, if you can attract one person, that means others are probably attracted to you as well. Again, we need to, and I keep harping on this choosing thing, because it back in ancient days when we were in small villages, we didn't have that choice. Everything was the Costco choice. You only had two people that were eligible, and eligible, like the same age range could be like 10 years, somebody 10 years older, 10 years younger, whatever. And it was easy to choose. And then if you're a woman, sometimes it was chosen for you. So even depending on your culture. And so sometimes not only the ability to choose so many, but the ability to choose it all is relatively new in society. And yet we find ourselves less happy, and less able to make these choices. So just remember that. And I guess I would like to end this podcast with just another thing that people seem to complain about, and that's just, and this is going primarily towards the women, but it's also towards the men, is when you're in a relationship, how do you know where you are? Why do women ask the question, why? Why? Where are we? What are we doing? And I would say, well, this is it's a very simple concept. Ask, you know, and, oh, I don't want to give him an ultimatum. Well, if he takes it as an ultimatum, then you know what kind of guy you're dating, you know, and bounce. Because here, I've been in situations where somebody says, hey, you know, I want to be in a relationship, but I don't know where we are and whatever. And I'd be like, oh, wow, you know, I'm not ready for that. And, you know, and we stop seeing each other. And you can say, wow, that's kind of mean. Like, no, but that's the way it's supposed to work. You know, because some women, but a lot of men are in situations, and that's not situations, just timing. We're in a place in our lives where we just want somebody to spend time with. We don't want, you know, the wife and kids yet. And that's not evil. That's not malicious, you know. That's just the truth. The only time it's evil or malicious is if they lie to you and say, this is what I want, and that's not what they want. That's why I go back to the beginning of this podcast. It's always best to be honest, you know. And as a woman, you should be an adult. Again, comes from that princess thing that I say that, and again, I don't blame women for raising women like this. I blame men for raising their daughters like this. Is that they're expecting Prince Charming. There's no Prince Charmings. Let me repeat that. There are no Prince Charming. The guy you think is the rudest, most obnoxious, you know, most chauvinistic guy in the world, at some other point in life will probably have a woman that worships the ground he walks on and thinks he's just, wow, she's so lucky to have him. One of the things I used to tell some of my girlfriends is like, look, you take the nicest guy you know. He may be married and you maybe envy, you know, the woman who's married him, and he's just so nice. And so if you were in his head for 10 seconds, you might want to exterminate all men because all men have a lot of the same thoughts, you know, sexually, and, you know, they think things are hot, and that's just who we are. And again, just because we have these things biologically, doesn't mean you act on them. Doesn't mean you cheat on your wife. It doesn't mean you do these things. They're temptations. They're there, you know. But yeah, you know, do I see attractive women out in the world, even though I'm married? I'm like, wow, that chick's hot. Yeah, I think that. You know what I mean? But do I act on it? No. Guess what? If somebody cuts me off, I might want to punch him. It doesn't mean I punch him. You know, there's a lot of instincts and biological urges that we have that we've learned to say no to in order to have a decent society. So, so yeah, there are no Prince Charmings out there. There's only dudes. and the guy you meet that you marry, or, you know, if you don't like to be married, if you're going to be in a long-term relationship with him, you know, it's basically a guy that you met at the right time in his life. And it's all about when you meet that guy. So I think that's where we'll end it today. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye.